And we are back with another UFC fight night this weekend. In the main event from the UFC Apex, we have got Jairzinho Rozenstruik taking on Shamil Gaziev in the heavyweight division. The UFC has done this a lot recently, putting unranked fighters who have had minimal experience in the UFC against a ranked guy in an Apex main event. We've seen that with Joe Pyfer, Abus Magomedov. Shamil Gaziev is that next guy in that spot for the UFC against a ranked and a well-known fighter in Rozenstruik. This card's weird considering. Okay, on Tapology, they have 11 fights. Yanis Gamori is out of his fight against Vinicius Oliveira. I think there are some websites that still have that up. I've seen on Twitter that Oliveira has said he needs a new opponent, so that fight is off. I think you could expect Ludovic Klein to still get a fight. Joel Alvarez has been rebooked, so I think Klein will still be on this card, likely against a Contender Series guy, for being honest, and maybe Vinicius Oliveira as well. So I think this fight card can get to 12 fights. Now, another fight, Raul Rosas Jr., Ricky Turcios is kind of on this card. Dana White said during the UFC Mexico broadcast last night, because of course Rosas pulled out right before the fight, that this fight has been reshuffled to this week. I don't think so. I think, I've seen some stuff on Twitter that this fight's now not happening at catchweight 140. I would expect Rosas Jr. and Turcios to go on UFC 299 in Miami. That's what I think. However, I'm still going to put the prediction of that fight on this video, but I would really expect it to be rebooked again for next week, because I really don't think Rosas Jr. and Turcios are going to be on this card. So really 10 fights for now on this card. Again, Oliveira might get a fight, and then also Ludovic Klein, but I don't know, because where we stand right now, confirmed UFC has 9 fights for this card. It's not great. But folks, if you haven't yet though, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for some more UFC here on the channel. Last week we went on an absolute heater between the PFL, UFC, and Bellator. I guess we went 19-4 both with the UFC and the PFL Bellator cards. So doing really well so far this year. I believe we're hitting at about 65% rate. And we are going to start off this 9-fight card, could be 10-fight card, with our first fight here. It is the UFC debut of Abdul Karim Al-Selwady taking on Loic Radzhabov here in this one for Jaguar Paw, now renamed to the Tajikistan Tank. For Radzhabov, 1-1 in the UFC. Of course, more well known, I would say, for his PFL run. Made it to the PFL championship fight against Hush Manfio. Lost as a pretty sizable favorite in that fight. Came into the UFC, beat Esteban Ribovic in his first fight by unanimous decision. A fight where Radzhabov again went to the ground. That's where you're going to see him really succeed a lot. 11 takedowns successfully in that fight. Went 11 for 21 on his takedown attempts. 7.5 minutes of control time in that fight. Did get dropped by Ribovic in that one though, and then he turned back. He got another fight with Matthias Rumbecki, lost the fight by second round knockout over in Jacksonville on the Josh Emmett, Ilya Topuria card. For Abdul Karim Al-Selwady, you know him from the Contender Series, and he picked up a huge win against George Hardwick. Hardwick, a guy who was a well-known prospect for, Cage Warriors. He comes into the Contender Series expected to make the UFC, obviously, with a win. He's the Cage Warriors lightweight champion, and he loses to Al-Selwady by unanimous decision. And Al-Selwady, as a huge underdog, goes in there, and I wouldn't say dominates, but wins every single round. I mean, really did not let Hardwick get going. Al-Selwady won every single round and was doing more damage in every single round as well. And now here he is in the UFC octagon against a guy here in Radzhabov, who is 1-1. Now, for Al-Selwady, you're going to get a lot of the striking game out of him. However, his 3 losses all do come by knockout. You go back to Brave, losing back-to-back fights by first-round knockout to Dumar Roa and Luan Santiago, and then a loss over in Desert Forest. That is all the way back, though, in 2014 by knockout in the first round. However, he's not really going to have to worry much, I think, about the striking game out of Radzhabov here, because Radzhabov, again, primary wrestler who can strike, don't get me wrong, but I just think his striking game can be improved still. His last knockout win came back at the PFL back in 2021. It was the second fight of the season where he won a fight by first round knockout, giving him the number 1 seed in the the lightweight division that year. And then of course he did lose to Hush Manfio after beating Alex Martinez in the first round. But for Radzhabov, again, 1-1 in the UFC from Tajikistan. You're going to see a lot of wrestling out of him. The boxing is improving as well. But for Al-Selwady, again, I think his striking is going to be better than Radzhabov. It's all going to come down to the defensive wrestling here in this fight out of Al-Selwady. You know he can wrestle as well. Did shoot 6 takedowns on Hardwick. Didn't necessarily need those takedowns, but of course created the threat of the takedown against Hardwick. Ended up winning the fight on the feet for the most part. Did get 1 takedown in the 3rd round of that fight. So I think Al-Selwady is going to be decent enough to keep this fight standing. I think he's going to give Radzhabov some trouble getting this fight on the ground, and I think you will see primarily a striking fight between Radzhabov and Abdul Karim Al-Selwady in this fight, and I think that's how Al-Selwady is going to win his UFC debut. Now, again, it speaks volumes about Al-Selwady with his decision victory over Hardwick. Again, Hardwick, the UFC was hyping that Contender Series card around Hardwick and about how he was going to get in the UFC with a victory, and Al-Selwady, again, shut that down. He's a Fortis MMA guy. It's Fortis MMA versus Kill Cliff's FC fighter in Louis Radzhabov, and I think Fortis is going to pick up the win here. I think Al-Selwady will get it done. I think, again, his boxing is going to be good enough, and I think his defensive wrestling is going to keep this fight standing as well. So give me Al-Selwady to win the fight by unanimous decision in his UFC debut. Let's go to our next one here. We've got Christian Leroy Duncan taking on Claudio Ribeiro in this fight, and for Claudio Ribeiro, a mixed bag of results so far in the UFC. I'll never forget, Claudio Ribeiro is, believe it or not, the first fighter I ever bet on in for mixed martial arts. I bet on him to beat Abdulrazak Alhassan. Now, again, I've done a lot better since then, but it's okay. Ribeiro 11-4 professionally, and we've gotten his next two fights right. We got him to beat Joe Holmes and then lose to Roman Kopylov. I believe I got that Kopylov pick right on the button as well at the second round knockout. He's going to be a huge underdog in this fight against Christian Leroy Duncan. He is going to be a pretty sizable underdog because this is a tough fight for him. It truly is. Christian Leroy Duncan is a good fighter. He is a very good fighter who I believe is 2-1 in the UFC so far. Yeah, 2-1. The one loss is to Arman Petrosyan, a fight where Petrosyan just dominated the fight on the feet, won every single moment of that fight on the feet. You have some 29-28 scorecards for Petrosyan in that one, but Duncan, again, it didn't really look that great, couldn't get started in that fight, and since then he has beat Dennis Tululin by second round knockout. However, Tululin, not the greatest UFC fighter. I believe he came to the promotion with a record of 11-6, came out of it with a record of 11-9. They gave him some really tough fights, but Tululin was there to get knocked out, and that's what Christian Leroy Duncan did, and it was a much needed victory for Leroy Duncan as well. For Claudio Ribeiro, 1-2 in the UFC. I just find it weird matchmaking here. I really think it is. I think the Radzhabov Al-Selwady fight is a difficult fight to pick. Some fights, as we go on through this card, are not that tough to pick. Leroy Duncan is a huge favorite in this fight for good reason. I mean, you got him at around -225. That line is only going to keep getting, extended further for Christian Leroy Duncan as we get closer to fight night. You look at Tapology, 95% of voters going with Christian Leroy Duncan, 5% going with Claudio Ribeiro. It's because, again, Ribeiro, in 3 fights in the UFC, has been knocked out twice. All 3 of his fights have ended in the second round. They've all ended by knockout. One of them he got the finish against a guy in Joe Holmes over in Newark, New Jersey, who, I like Joe Holmes, but is he really UFC caliber? No, not really. And he fought a power puncher, don't get me wrong, in Abdulrazak Alhassan. I think they gave him kind of a tough ask in the fight against Roman Kopylov, but this is another tough ask in the form of Leroy Duncan, because, again, Leroy Duncan, very good striker. I know the Dusko Todorovic fight ended because Todorovic got injured. That's fine. You look at the Tululin fight, this guy's more than capable. CLD had a lot of hype going into the UFC because he was the Cage Warriors middleweight champion. Because he was, a defending champion of that belt in that promotion. He comes through so far in the UFC as 2-1. He was undefeated in Cage Warriors at 7-0. I think he's got all the skills and more to beat Claudio Ribeiro in this fight. Don't get me wrong, Ribeiro can strike, and he's got power on the feet, and he's a very interesting fighter to watch, but I think all around, when we look at the technical aspect of this fight, Christian Leroy Duncan is the way better striker. Yes, Ribeiro is going to have a puncher's chance in this fight. Don't get me wrong. He's going to have somewhat of a chance to land on Leroy Duncan and put him out, but from what we've seen, Christian Leroy Duncan, pretty good chin, and I just think he's going to be able to walk through those Ribeiro punches, and I think eventually he's going to find that knockout blow. So give me a second round knockout finish for Christian Leroy Duncan. Again, Ribeiro has had all 3 of his fights so far in the UFC end in the second round. We're going to pick it yet again. I'm going to take the English fighter in CLD, Christian Leroy Duncan, to beat Claudio Ribeiro in the second round. Let's go on to our third fight. We've got Ayman Zahabi taking on a very tough out in Javid Basharat. Basharat undefeated so far in the UFC and as a professional, 14-0. Had his last fight against Victor Henry stopped because he kicked Victor Henry in the balls, but it's going to happen. Basharat now gets Ayman Zahabi in this one. Zahabi 10-2 as a professional MMA fighter, and he is coming off of 3 straight wins against Draco Rodriguez, Ricky Tercios, who we might see on this card, and Aoreichi Long in his last fight, knocking out Aoreichi Long in the first round with a huge left hook, sitting him down and winning the fight. But they gave Ayman Zahabi a difficult fight, and this is a guy who fights at 135 pounds at 36 years of age. Now, don't look at the guy. He looks like Ariel Helwani, and that's how I'm always going to remember Ayman Zahabi. But they gave this guy such a difficult and tough ask. Try to combine those 2 words. With the Snow Leopard and Javid Basharat. Basharat, man, 14-0 so far in the UFC, 3-0, and just been dominant so far. Again, has completely shut out most of his opponents so far in the UFC. Trevin Jones was pretty dominant. The Tony Gravely fight did lose a round in that one, but ended up winning it 2-1. And then Mateus Mendoza fight ended up winning it 30-27. Now Mendoza probably should have got the nod against Jesus Aguilar last night, but I wasn't complaining. I got that one right. But Basharat, again, 3-0 in the UFC, hasn't really seen the step up in competition that Ayman Zahabi is. Victor Henry was going to be that step in competition, and Javid Basharat was doing a decent job dealing with that. I would say he won that first round until the fight, of course, ended with the no contest in the second. But Zahabi, don't get me wrong, is going to be a step up in competition. Zahabi is 4-2 in the UFC. Now, he did start his UFC run 1-2, losing back-to-back fights to Ricardo Ramos and Vince Morales, but since then, 3 straight wins, and he has shown the power as well. So Zahabi is going to bring, a different challenge for Javid Basharat in this fight with his power and with the striking game that he does bring in this fight. But you know what Javid Basharat is going to do. He's going to look to wrestle. He's going to look to mix it up, and Basharat is going to put on a performance that I think is going to overwhelm Ayman Zahabi. He's going to be all over. The pace for Javid Basharat is tough. Is tough and difficult to deal with. I do think against Zahabi is a step up in competition. Do not get me wrong. I just think Javid Basharat is levels ahead. I think Basharat is going to be a guy that is going to stay undefeated for a while here. He is a tough out. He was a -600 favorite against Victor Henry. He is a -470 favorite against Ayman Zahabi. You look at Tapology, 96% of people on Tapology going with Basharat to win, 4% going for Zahabi. And again, it speaks for itself. Javid Basharat is a very good ground fighter. He's going to look to get this fight down. I think he might be able to do so. Zahabi has been a decent defensive wrestler so far in the UFC. The only guy to have a lot of success on the ground against him was Ricardo Ramos. Wasn't able to keep him down, but he was able to get him down 3 times. But really, Zahabi was able to pop back up to his feet. So again, that's what I'm saying earlier. This is a different fight for Javid Basharat. It is a different stylistic fight. It's going to be a fight that is going to be tough for him, but I think Basharat is going to get the win here. I think it's going to be a tough decision victory for him, but he's going to get it done. Basharat remains undefeated with a decision win. Let's go on to our next one. I believe this is going to still be on the undercard, I think. Matt Schnell and Steve Erceg. This is a good one. You've got 2 ranked guys at 125 pounds, and with the division now at 125 that we're going to talk about later on in this video with Muhammad Mokaev and with Alex Perez, this is a wide open division. I think we anticipate that Brandon Royval is going to get the next title shot against Alexandre Pantoja. He's going to get back-to-back title shots, but let's just look at the division. There's no one who can possibly challenge for Pantoja next. They need a challenger for Pantoja at UFC 301 in May in Brazil. Well, the problem is you look at the top of the weight class. Moreno just lost. Royval just won. Okay, Royval should be the #1 contender. Albazi's injured. It can't be him. Kai Kara-France has lost back-to-back fights, and Royval has beat Kai Kara-France. Manel Kape just missed weight. You can't give it to him. Mateus Nicolao's last fight, he lost to Royval. You can't give it to him. The guy that you can consider is Muhammad Mokaev. I understand, but we'll see. Tagir Ulanbekov is coming off one over Cody Durden. That does not warrant a title shot. Alex Perez is coming off back-to-back losses. Matt Schnell just lost to Nicolau. And Erceg sure is undefeated in the UFC, but can a win over Matt Schnell really warrant a title shot? I don't know. And there is Tetsuya Taira as well. The one guy I would like to see Pantoja fight is Kyoji Horiguchi over from Ryzen. That would be the best fight. I don't think the UFC is going to do that. I don't think they're going to go out and get Kyoji Horiguchi, even though I think Dana White has hinted at it. Unfortunately, I don't think Horiguchi is going to be coming over just yet back to the UFC. So I think it will be Royval Pantoja 3 in Brazil, even though, again, Pantoja has beat him twice already, just like he has beat Moreno 3 times, but there seriously is no other fight. And yes, Royval did look good in the 5-round main event and beat Brandon Moreno, a guy that nobody's been able to beat other than, Pantoja and Figueiredo. So I think it will be Royval next, but this is a fight between 2 guys looking to make their way into the title discussion in Matt Schnell and Steve Erceg. And for Schnell, again, you know Schnell's going to bring out a great fight. He's going to come out there and he's going to go for it. However, Recently, the results haven't been all that great. He's lost 2 out of 3, lost to Brandon Royval, submission in the first round, came back and won an incredible fight against Sumudaerji over on Long Island, but then quickly turned around and fought Matheus Nicolau and got brutally knocked down in the second round over in Orlando, Florida. He's been booked twice since then against Dvorak and Erceg, but now the fight has been pushed back to this date over in the UFC Apex, and this is going to be a good fight. Erceg, again, another guy in the UFC who is undefeated. He is 2-0, wins over David Dvorak and Alessandro Costa, but Erceg, a very well-balanced fighter. He can mix it up on the feet and on the ground, and Erceg is pretty solid. Again, was known for the submission game over in Eternal MMA over in Australia before his UFC run, but he has, again, tougher opponents. He's been forced to strike some too, but Erceg's striking game is not all that bad in that case as well. So you get this fight here. Matt Schnell, I believe, is an underdog in this one, plus 240. Erceg at minus 300, and it makes sense. Erceg hasn't really blown away his opponents, I wouldn't say, so far in the UFC. He's done enough to win. He's won both fights against Dvorak and Costa 2-1 on the cards, but again, it has been enough to win the fights. Schnell is just a mixed bag, man. He's 34 years old. He's gone on some win streaks in the UFC. He's gone on some losing streaks. Right now, it has been kind of tough for him. But again, fighting the top of the weight class in his losses, at least to Royval, who is the #1 contender, and to Matheus Nicolau, who is a top 5 guy. And I believe, and I remember I talked about this when we were going into the Nicolau fight. I said, like, you know, he fought Sumudaerji. He was on the brink of death in that fight. He came back and won. Mudaerji knocked him down twice in that fight, and then he turned that quickly into a fight against Matheus Nicolau, and he lost, obviously. And I was like, okay, his chin's not going to be healed after quickly turning around and after he just fought Mudaerji just like 4 months prior to the fight with Nicolau, but I'm glad he's taken a year off. Erceg's not going to be the type of guy that's going to knock him out. Erceg only has 1 win by knockout in his career. It came in 2019. It was a first-round knockout over in Eternal MMA, but that's the only time Erceg's ever got a knockout in his career. That's not what he's going to do. I think we will see Erceg look to take down Schnell, because Schnell has been taken down before in the past. 46% takedown defense rate so far in the UFC, but most guys are willing to strike with Schnell, considering Schnell does wrestle some in his own right too. So we'll see. Again, Matt Schnell has been knocked out 4 times. Erceg's not going to be the guy that's going to do that, but I think Erceg's going to do a lot of damage on the feet. I think the ground game is going to be interesting in this fight, because both guys, again, are pretty well balanced down there. And I don't know. I think Erceg, though, will win his rounds and will win this fight on the feet. I don't think he's going to really engage much in the wrestling game out of Matt Schnell, because I think that's where Schnell does have the best opportunity to win. Of course, we've seen the submissions that he's pulled off, like the big one over Sumudaerji, right? But Schnell can strike too. You did see the Royval fight in Arizona, where he knocked down Royval in the first round, but then followed up and got submitted with the guillotine choke. So Schnell does have power as well, but an all-around striking game and technically sound, yeah, I do think Erceg is better. I think Erceg is going to be able to pick his shots in this one. I think Erceg will be able to find openings, and he's going to be able to do more damage against Matt Schnell. I would worry a little bit with the chin of Schnell as well. If you've been knocked out 4 times at 125 pounds, that's a little bit concerning, considering these guys do not hit all that hard, at least, you know, if you're not Brandon Moreno. Oh, not Brandon Moreno. Moreno doesn't... No, Moreno doesn't really hit that hard. Pantoja did knock out Schnell. I would agree. Pantoja's got power, and then Figueiredo obviously had power at 25 as well. But we'll see what happens in this one. I think Erceg's going to win the fight, though. I got Steve Erceg to take it by unanimous decision. Our next one is not this fight just yet. We are going to have Ricky Turcios and Raul Rosas Jr. I don't really know if this fight's going to be on the card now, but we're going to play the prediction from last week. Prediction does not change. I get it. There was an illness to Raul Rosas Jr. This fight should be at a catchweight of 140. I don't think the outcome really changes from last week, so let's just roll that and then get on to our next one. Go to the next one here. Raul Rosas Jr. is back. Don't forget, the guy's only 19 years old, taking on Ricky Turcios. Turcios is 12-3. He is 30 years old. He is 11 years older than Raul Rosas Jr. And Raul Rosas looked good in his last one, beating Terrence Mitchell. It was a fight that everyone kind of anticipated him to win and expected him to win. He was a minus 750 favorite in that fight. He won the fight by knockout in the first round. This is a step up in Ricky Turcios. Depends how Turcios fights. The Iman Zahabi fight was just so bad out of Ricky Turcios. I know he comes back and beats Kevin Natividad in his last one by split decision, but he was supposed to beat Kevin Natividad, and he barely beats the guy. Natividad saw not that much success in the UFC. This guy was 0-3 in the promotion. He now fights in LFA yet again, and Turcios barely beats him. He gets dropped in the 3rd round, and he wins the first 2, sure. But Turcios, again, goes to the wrestling to win those 2 rounds. Natividad tries to take him down, but really on the ground, Turcios finds some success in the 1st and the 3rd. which does propel him to win the fight. The second round is the swing round, but the judges ended up giving Turcios the win 2-1. The Aman Zahabi fight was just so confusing because Turcios doesn't do anything. He gets outstruck 2-1 in that fight, and he just kind of stands there and doesn't do anything, which was so weird because his fight over against Brady Hiestand in the Ultimate Fighter finale card was so good. He wins the Ultimate Fighter. It's a back and forth war on the feet. He beats Hiestand. He looks really good, and Hiestand has won 2 fights since then, and Turcios, is 1-1, which is fine, but I think Turcios just, I think he hasn't looked good since the Hiestand fight. The Natividad fight, sure, he wins. He didn't look all that great in the Kevin Natividad fight. He was supposed to blow Natividad out of the water in that one, and he really didn't. He kept the fight competitive, and sure, he wins. Credit to him. But I just don't think Turcios is the same guy that we thought he was going to be out the Contender Series. The Ultimate Fighter. I thought he was going to be a really entertaining guy who's going to bring crazy fights on the feet. He really hasn't been all that. And Raul Rosas, I think, again, we need to weather our expectations on Raul Rosas. He's 19 years old. This is not a guy who, again, was talking a big game at one point, saying he was going to be the youngest UFC champion. He's going to go out there and beat Aljamain Sterling in his 5th fight. He wasn't able to do that, obviously. I mean, look at the guy who's 2-1 in the UFC. But again, he ran into a very tough Christian Rodriguez in his 2nd fight in the promotion. Rodriguez, who is 3-1, with his only loss being to JSP Jonathan Pierce, a guy who was very good in his own right, who did lose to Joe Anderson Brito, which is unfortunate, but still, Rosas has been fighting good guys. His one loss is against a very good fighter. The wins, Jay Perrin, Terrence Mitchell. I mean, again, not the best names, let's be honest. Both those guys probably will not see another fight in the UFC. Mitchell might, maybe, I don't know. But this is a step up because, again, Turcios is a UFC caliber guy. I don't really know if Perrin and Mitchell are really all that UFC caliber. This fight's going to be won and lost on the ground, though. This is a fight that is dependent on who the better wrestler is. I think it is Raul Rosas. I think Rosas is better down there. Striking-wise, I'm going to give it to Ricky Turcios. I know, again, Turcios is a mixed bag of results in the feet because you can either get the Turcios that showed up in the Brady Hiestand fight or you can get the Turcios that showed up in the Aman Zahabi fight. You can get a guy who's very, laid back and won't do anything, or a guy who's willing to go out there and really risk it all to win the fight. However, I think Rosas will see a lot of success on the ground. Again, the guy's only 19 years old, but he does that very well. He's a very good grappler who is going to give Turcios a lot of problems down there. I think if Raul Rosas is able to get him down, I think eventually he's actually going to find a submission. I think Rosas is able to win the fight by 2nd round sub. Sending the Mexican fighters, I know Rosas is born in the U.S. I believe he was born in the USA. I think he was. He was born in the USA, raised in the USA, trains in the USA, but UFC is going to market him as a Mexican fighter here. So in the UFC sense, we'll go to 8-1 in the Mexican fighters here. 8-1, 7-1. I'm losing track. It's fine. Just know it's a pretty big margin for the Mexican fighters in this one. Raul Rosas, a pretty sizable favorite, -260. Again, I think the grappling is going to be key in this one, and I think he is a better grappler than Ricky Turcios, and that's what's going to give him the victory. I'm not all that impressed with Turcios anymore. I'm really not. It sucks because at one point I was. I think if Turcios is able to win, he's got to keep this fight standing, and he's got to really put it on Rosas on the feet. I just don't know if he's going to be able to do so. Give me Raul Rosas Jr. to win the fight by 2nd round submission. Okay, it is the return of Umar Nurmagomedov. 16-0, has not fought since January of 2023. Was obviously booked in the main event over in Nashville, Tennessee against Corey Sandhagen. Had to pull out of that fight. He is now back, and nobody wanted to fight the guy, so here he is against a UFC newcomer in Beksat Alkaman in this fight. The Kazakhstani bantamweight, who is 5'7", will be getting Umar Nurmagomedov. I mean, Nurmagomedov's 5'8", so it's not going to make that much of a difference. But for Beksat Alkaman, 17-1, what have I seen in a Beksat Alkaman outside the UFC? Well, I mean, obviously he hasn't fought in the UFC yet. He is a dynamic striker who will try to make you quit. Don't get me wrong, I think this guy's pretty solid. I really think he is. This was a good find for the UFC. I think he was going to be in this spot eventually. I mean, maybe not against Umar Nurmagomedov, but he's 17-1. Now, the one loss comes all the way back in a Kazakhstani promotion in 2020 against a guy at the time who I believe was 19-1. He's now 19-2. Or sorry, he was not 19-1. He was, what was he at the time? He was, 12-1. He's now 19-2. One of his losses is to Vinicius Oliveira, but he lost to another Kazakhstani guy, and he got submitted in the second round. Now, that's a little concerning because his ground game hasn't been tested all that much because most of these guys are willing to strike with him. And that's a problem because, Umar Nurmagomedov is going to take him down. So maybe that gives away the pick a little bit of what might happen because Alkmaar is getting subbed by guys who are not in the UFC. But, you never know what the competition's like in some of these promotions. Now, he's been fighting in Octagon. Octagon, is a decent promotion, I would say. And then he fought in UAE Warriors after that, where he won a fight and then went back to Octagon over in Kazakhstan. And again, he's 17-1. He's all right. He's pretty good, I would say. His striking, again, is pretty good. He mixes up his kicks really well with his strikes, and all around a pretty solid kickboxer in Bekzat Alkmaar. I think this guy's going to be in the UFC for a pretty long time. I do think so. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be around. I think you might see him in the top 20-ish eventually in his career. He's only 26 years old. This guy's only going to get better, truly. However, they threw him right in the fire with Umar Nurmagomedov. And shout out to Alkmaar for taking this fight because nobody wants to fight Umar Nurmagomedov because the guy's undefeated. He's 16-0, and he's going to be a problem, I think. I think once you get him against some of the higher level guys, I think he's going to have some trouble. But against a guy making his UFC debut at Bekzat Alkmaar, whose ground game is kind of unproven, it's going to be difficult because Umar Nurmagomedov is going to go for the leg shoot, and he's going to have his way on the ground. I don't think this one lasts very long. I don't think we're going to see much of the strike game out of Alkmaar in this fight. And it's not like Umar Nurmagomedov hasn't seen good strikers before. Like, he's seen Raoni Barcelos, who, did all right in his fight where he won against Christian Quinones. Umar Nurmagomedov has seen good strikers before. I would say Alkmaar's a pretty good striker, but I think, his ground game leaves a lot to be desired. Again, the one loss does come by sub. I think Nurmagomedov is going to test him down there, and I think Umar is going to get the submission in the first round. This is not the fight that Umar Nurmagomedov needs to be having at this point of his career. I think he needs to be getting fights in the top 15 because, again, the wins are Sergey Morozov, Brian Kelleher, Nate Maness, Raoni Barcelos. It's time he gets a ranked opponent. Who wants to fight this guy? Nobody does, though. Like, realistically, where do you go next with Umar Nurmagomedov? Rob Font. I mean, I know that's a fight that, Umar's probably going to win, but give him Rob Font. I would say that. Like, Rob Font's coming off 2 losses. You want to get back in the title picture, you go out, you beat Umar Nurmagomedov. If not, okay, well, too bad, right? Like, do you want to throw Umar Jonathan Martinez? I think that would be a tough fight, but I think that's a fight that would be interesting. Mario Bautista's here. Even like Ricky Simone, who is decent defensively with wrestling, even though I think, again, Umar would win that fight, but there needs to be better fights for him. Hell, give him Saeed Nurmagomedov. I'm just kidding. That would never happen. The UFC would never do that, and I don't think these guys would agree to fight each other. So, even though I think they're out in different camps in Dagestan, right? Umar's with the traditional, the well-known Dagestani camp, and Saeed's with the other one, I believe, right? Yeah, he's at the Makhachkala one. Yeah, I think. Yeah, because there's 2 camps in Dagestan. Anyways, I don't think that would ever happen. Give me Umar Nurmagomedov or Rob Font. That's a fight the UFC would do. They throw that on an Apex main event. Like, just do it. Or hell, take the UFC back to Russia and do that. They're not going to do that because the UFC loves the Apex and they're getting lazy. But, if I was matchmaking, take him back to Russia and put Umar in the main event. However, Nurmagomedov is going to have his way in this fight with the primary striker. Umar Nurmagomedov is going to melt Bekzat Alkmaar. I want to see Alkmaar again get another fight in the UFC, a fight that he can really showcase the striking game. But for now, Umar is going to dominate Nurmagomedov by first round sub. There's a reason he is a minus 750 favorite. Okay, let's go to our next one. I don't know if this bout order is right that I have, but it is what it is. It's here. This is probably going to get relegated to the prelims sometime this week. But Eric Anders, Jamie Pickett. I mean, so originally this fight card was supposed to be in Saudi Arabia. Of course, that's been rescheduled to the summer, I believe, or May, summerish. Eric Anders, Jamie Pickett was always a weird fight that the UFC was going to put on in Saudi Arabia. Now, I don't know how Jamie Pickett's still in the UFC. He's 13-10, and his record in the UFC is 2-6. Who are his wins, you may ask? Loriano Staropoli and Joe Holmes. Okay, well, he came into the UFC, lost back-to-back fights to Stefan Chukwi, Jordan Wright. The Jordan Wright fight maybe should have pointed to like, okay, Jamie Pickett's not the best. And Jordan Wright knocked him out in the first round. Don't get me wrong. Jordan Wright, a guy who's going back to Fury FC later or next month, good striker, does not have a chin. And he was able to get to Pickett before Pickett was able to get to him. Now, Pickett, after that, though, wins back-to-back fights, then gets Kyle Daukaus, loses to Kyle Daukaus when he got the Darce choke and he wanted to call himself the Darce Knight. That was in a co-main event of an Apex card, which, believe it or not, that actually happened. Main event was Johnny Walker and Jamal Hill, the fight where Johnny Walker got knocked down and went, that one. Okay, Jamie Pickett lost to Dennis Tulin. I actually forgot Tulin won a fight in the UFC. Yeah, believe it or not, Tulin actually did win a fight in the promotion. He beat Jamie Pickett, so there you go. Tulin's out the promotion. Pickett's still here. He lost to Bo Nickel, and then he lost to Josh Fremd, and he's still here. The UFC is doing this is because they want Eric Anders to win a fight. Anders is though coming off of, he's coming off loss to Marc-Andre Barriault. He beat Kyle Daukaus before that. Daukaus definitely will be back in the UFC very soon. This guy's already won the Cage Fury Championship, and he's already defended it. So, yeah, I think Daukaus should be back very soon. He's a UFC caliber guy. Just ran into the wrong guys. He ran into Anders, Dolidze, Kevin Holland, Phil Hawes, Brendan Allen. They gave him tough guys, and that was Phil Hawes before his chin was completely gone. Like, yeah, Daukaus, his next fight should be under the UFC banner. Anders, though, against Pickett, this should be very one-sided. Eric Anders is so much better than Jamie Pickett, truly. Jamie Pickett is 35 years old, Anders is 36, but this is a complete mismatch. I don't care. I know, again, Pickett has not been good in the UFC. That's fair. And I know Anders hasn't been good either recently, but so, again, two guys who have been very good in the UFC recently. What is this going to show? It's going to be an Eric Anders complete domination. Anders is going to knock this guy out in the first round. Pickett does have the reach advantage, and that's where he should look to win this fight. He should stay on the outside. He should keep his distance from Eric Anders. But Anders is going to be able to close distance and knock him out. If not, I think Anders can probably take him down as well. Anders is a pretty solid wrestler, too. Jamie Pickett, what does this guy do well? I don't know. He doesn't really do anything well. He won 2 boring fights against Joe Holmes and Laureano Staropoli in the past. That's all he's done. He won 2 very boring fights. He's been taken down at will against Bo Nickel, well, obviously, but Kyle Daukaus took him down. He was able to get takedowns against Josh Fremd, which I found a little bit interesting, but Fremd was kind of just better on the ground. He attempted a lot of subs in that fight, and again, Fremd ended up winning the fight because he ended up reversing positioning a couple times against Jamie Pickett on the ground. Yeah, Eric Anders will have his way no matter where he goes in this fight, whether it be the wrestling that Anders is go-to, and then he goes again and works his ground and pound, or he just simply goes in there, closes distance, and knocks out Jamie Pickett. It's going to be one of the two. Pickett, if he loses this fight, will be on a 5-fight losing streak to end his UFC career. He's lost his last 4 fights. Again, tell me why this guy's still in the UFC. I don't know. Again, this is a fight that they're trying to get Eric Anders a victory. Look at the odds, -310. Again, that's the only time Eric Anders is going to be a -310 favorite in the UFC. Give me Anders by first-round knockout, a guy who at one point in time main evented a UFC fight night. And let's now go to our next one here in the flyweight division. This is what I was talking about earlier. Muhammad Mokaev needs a dominant performance to get a title shot here. Because, yeah, that's kind of where we're at with the flyweight division. I don't think he's going to get it. I really don't think so. I think they're going to make Mokaev fight someone else. Because, again, 10-0 title challenger, I don't know. And coming off a win over Alex Perez, if Mokaev does get it, a guy in Perez who has fought once since his title fight in 2020. Now, his last fight was a loss to the now champion in Alexandre Pantoja, but Pantoja got him, took his back, neck crank, won the fight. And before that, he lost to Deiveson Figueiredo in a UFC pay-per-view main event where Figueiredo got him in a guillotine choke and subbed him. Perez, prior to all the injuries and prior to all the pullouts, has been solid. I mean, this is a guy who is all around a decent fighter. He dropped Jussier Formiga twice with leg kicks back at UFC 250. In the Apex, he was dominant in a fight in Raleigh, I think it was Raleigh, North Carolina, where he subbed Jordan Espinoza. Right, like Alex Perez, when this guy is on, he's actually pretty solid. The problem is he doesn't fight all that often, and now they're giving him a Muhammad Mokaev who is very difficult to deal with. And I don't know what Alex Perez we're going to get, because in Alex Perez's last 2 fights, he's been subbed twice, combined in 3 minutes, to Figueiredo and Pantoja. Don't get me wrong, those are 2 of the last 3 champions in the flyweight division. The thing is, Mokaev might be another future champion. I don't know. I really don't know. Mokaev, he's been good, but Mokaev leaves a lot to be desired on the feet. He is good at getting the fight down. He is dominant down there. However, Alex Perez, I do think, has a decent chance to actually win this fight. I think Perez can keep this fight standing. It's a guy in Perez who has a pretty good background with his defensive wrestling. Not many guys are able to take him down. The last 2 guys to take him down are Pantoja and Benavidez, and those are the only 2 guys to take him down in the UFC. And that was a prime Joseph Benavidez, or somewhat prime Joseph Benavidez, who ended up knocking out Alex Perez in 2018. But still, right, and that was a first-round knockout too. But again, if Perez can keep this fight standing, he's going to give Mokaev a lot of trouble. Like, Mokaev has not been, he's been getting submissions, but all 3 of his last submissions came in the 3rd round. It has taken him a while to get these subs, right? It has not been go in there, get the takedown, and immediately submit your opponent. No, it's taken him a while, and he has struggled a little bit on the feet too. So That's where Alex Perez can really look to win this fight, is if he can keep Mokaev standing and he can go out there and, really, because again, if Perez can keep Mokaev standing, I think Perez wins. I don't think that's going to be able to happen, though, because what Alex Perez are we going to get in this fight? The guy has not fought, the guy is not active, he's pulled out of so many fights, and Mokaev is going to only keep getting better. The guy's 23 years old. Again, he's undefeated as an amateur, undefeated as a professional. He's 10-0 as a professional MMA fighter. I believe he's 4-0 in the UFC, 5-0 in the UFC, looking for his 6th victory. I think Mokaev wins. He's going to get him down in the first round. Not going to get the sub in the first, but he'll get it in the second round. And Muhammad Mokaev wins the fight against Alex Perez by a second round submission, because again, stylistically, this is incredibly difficult for Perez. He's got this, I think, the blueprint to beat Mokaev's out there. My thing is, I don't think Alex Perez can successfully pull it off. I think the top guys can beat Muhammad Mokaev. I think really if they try to give Mokaev Pantoja in Brazil, Pantoja's going to melt him. That fight will not be competitive. They should not give Mokaev the next title fight, because he's going to lose. If they give Mokaev Pantoja, he is going to lose. I think they need to give Mokaev Brandon Moreno. That's what they should do. You can still main event Brandon Moreno coming off back-to-back losses. Let's find out if Moreno is really washed or not now. You give him Muhammad Mokaev. Moreno, if he wants to get back in title contention, needs to fight a guy like Mokaev. I don't think he should get a title shot by beating Mokaev, but that's the fight that needs to happen. If not, Manel Kape I can see, but no, I think if you really want to skyrocket Mokaev, give him Brandon Moreno. Again, I'm not a fan of giving Royval a third fight against Pantoja and a second straight title fight, but it's kind of what needs to be done at this point. So I think of Mokaev, Albazi, or Moreno. If you give Mokaev Albazi, then the winner, no matter what, can fight for the championship. If you give him Moreno, I don't think Moreno can fight for the belt, but still, it would be an interesting test that I'd like to see. So the flyweight division is interesting. Personally, if I was going to book the rest of the division, I do Pantoja, Royval for the title, even though I want Kyoji Horiguchi, but I just got to understand that's not really realistic. So Royval, Pantoja, Moreno, Mokaev, Kai Kara-France, and do Albazi and Tagir Ulanbekov, because that's your backup fight. If Mokaev loses to Moreno, then you can just give Albazi the title fight if he beats Ulanbekov, right? And then maybe you do like the winner of Urseg Schnell against Alex Perez, and then just give Tetsuro Taira a tougher opponent. Like, go out, re-sign Askar Askarov, and give Tetsuro Taira Askar Askarov. Or, like, realistically, give Tetsuro Taira, like, Cody Durden. Durden's a guy who's kind of decent wrestling-wise, and we could see a different fight. But this fight, though, Muhammad Mokaev, second round sub. Let's go on to our co-main event of the evening. Yeah, we're already on the co-main event because this card is short. Okay, Vitor Petrino taking on Tyson Pedro. I don't know how this fight of all fights gets the co-main event spot, but I guess it does, because there will probably be a knockout in this one. Tyson Pedro, since his return after the long layoff, is 3-1, right? Wins over Ike Villanueva, Harry Hunsucker, and Anton Turkalagi. Now, those aren't the best guys. The one decent fighter he took on was Modestas Bukauskas, and Bukauskas beat him by unanimous decision. Bukauskas went in there, and it was a back-and-forth fight in the feet, but Bukauskas was able to win by unanimous decision, right? He won 2-1 on my card. Vitor Petrino is Tyson Pedro's opponent here. This guy is very difficult. He just beat Modestas Bukauskas, and he knocked him out in the second round. Petrino is 3-0 in the UFC, and he's got heavy hands. He can also grapple if he needs to, as you saw in the Marcin Prachnio fight. And then the Anton Turkalagi fight, incredible fight over on where was that held? It was in Vegas. It was the theater at the Virgin Hotels, where I don't understand why they just don't do cards there instead of the Apex, but whatever. I mean, I know why they do cards in the Apex. They want to save money, but it's just such a horrible viewing experience. Anyways, yeah, Petrino's good. This is a tough fight for Pedro. It really is. Because where does Pedro win? On the ground, no. Petrino's really good at jiu-jitsu. I don't think so. And he's a pretty good wrestler. And then on the feet, well, Petrino's been beating everyone on the feet. So, truly, where does Tyson Pedro win this fight? I don't know. I think Vitor Petrino's going to melt him. I think he is. He's undefeated for a reason. He's 10-0. I'll give the pick away right now. Vitor Petrino's going to win the fight by first-round knockout. This fight's not going to last very long. Petrino is 26 years old. He's still improving. This guy is going to be a top 15 fighter in short order at 205 pounds. There's not many guys that can do what Petrino does. Petrino can keep the fight on the feet when he needs to. He can go to the ground if he needs to, use jiu-jitsu, or if he's on the feet, it will take him a while sometimes. He's not the most like active fighter in terms of going for a finish. He's going to wait. He's going to wait for the counter punch. He's going to wait for his opportunities. I think Petrino is beatable if you fight him the right way. But in a fight like this against Pedro, I think he's going to really exploit him. Pedro is going to fall forward. Pedro is going to overextend on a big shot. Petrino's going to counter. He's going to catch him with the hook. He's going to probably drop him. That's how I think this fight's going to end up. Because Petrino's going to wait. You saw the fight against Modestas Bukauskas, right? The fight goes a whole round. And the first round, nothing really happens. I mean, Petrino gets a takedown, but on the feet, it's kind of, just a, feeling out process in that first round until the second round happens and Petrino drops Bukauskas. So, again, Petrino is not the most active fighter on the feet, but he's going to pick his shots. He's going to look at everything. He's going to see what his opponent is throwing him, and eventually he's going to catch his opponent. I think it's going to be a late first-round knockout victory for Vitor Petrino. Pedro's going to overextend. He's going to get knocked out. Again, Pedro has been very protected so far in his second UFC run, or the second part of his UFC run, right? His first run in the UFC ends losing 3 out of 4. He loses to Ilir Latifi, beats Saparbek Safarov, who was horrible, loses to OSP, loses to a very old Shogun Rua, comes back in 2022, beats Ike Villanueva, who everybody beats Harry Hunsucker, who everybody beat, loses to Modestas Bukauskas, and beats Anton Turkalaji, who's 0-3 in the promotion. Right? Pedro has not beat that many UFC caliber guys. He's been very protected against low-level guys, and now they're saying, okay, go out here in a co-main event and prove it, and go fight Vitor Petrino. Well, this is just difficult for him. The last time Tyson Pedro was in a co-main event spot, he was a minus 600 favorite. What happened? He lost to Shogun Rua. Over in Australia on Fox Sports 1, he ended up losing the fight. The main event was Dos Santos and Tai Tuivasa. Actually, surprisingly, a very good card. That card was... It was entertaining, for me, honestly. I mean, Sodiq Yusuff was on the main card. Jimmy Crute, Paul Craig's on that card. Justin Willis won a very boring decision against Mark Hunt, but still, what happened to Justin Willis, by the way? Well, he was boring. That's what happened. Petrino's going to win the fight by first-round knockout. Justin Willis really has not fought a fight since the Curtis Blaydes fight. That is crazy. I mean, again, he wasn't that entertaining, but the guy was actually 4-1 in the UFC before fighting Curtis Blaydes in a co-main event. Anyways, Big Pretty, or I believe as Curtis Blaydes called him, Big Titty, is now out of the UFC. I don't know how I got stuck talking about Justin Willis, but this fight, Vitor Petrino is going to beat Tyson Pedro. He's going to knock him out in the first round, and I'm excited to see what the future holds for Petrino, but he's going to remain undefeated going to 11-0. Let's go to the co-main, not the co-main event, let's go to the main event. Jairzinho Rozenstruik, Shamil Gaziev. This is interesting. It's actually interesting because Gaziev, again, 1-0 in the UFC, and they say, all right, go fight in a main event. Yeah. What has Gaziev done so far? Well, okay, his first fight, which I'm going to consider his first fight in the Contender Series, he fights Greg Velasco. He was a huge favorite in that fight. Velasco really shouldn't have been in there with him. I don't think. Gaziev was a minus 500 favorite. Velasco wasn't defeated 6-0 at the time, but this is a guy coming out of CFFC who I guess was the CFFC heavyweight champion, but really, Gaziev drops him pretty quickly, and then Velasco did not know what to do once the fight hit the mat. Gaziev got his back and submitted him through a naked choke. Gaziev, after that, went out and he beat Martin Budai on UFC 296, Edwards Covington. The fight was in the feet. Gaziev looked really good. Budai tried to take him down, couldn't do so. So Gaziev just kind of beat his head in for 6 minutes and ended up winning the fight by knockout in the second round. I think, we haven't seen Gaziev against a really good striker yet, and Rozenstruik, again, is a step up in competition. However, Jairzinho Rozenstruik has won one fight since 2021, and it's against Chris Daukaus. And Chris Daukaus is no longer in the UFC, right? Rozenstruik last fight lost to Jailton Almeida. He lost to Alexander Volkov, again with the Daukaus win in between, lost to Curtis Blaydes. They have been giving Rozenstruik very tough guys. The UFC has been, since Rozenstruik's debut in the promotion, they have been very high on Rozenstruik, right? They pushed him right away to an Alistair Overeem main event in DC, and he won. He was on his back for a good 15 minutes in that fight, but he ended up winning the fight. Then he gets Francis Ngannou. He loses the fight, but then he beats Junior Dos Santos 3 months later. Then he gets Ciryl Gane. He loses. Beats Augusto Sakai in a main event. Loses to Curtis Blaydes. Loses to Volkov in a main event. Beats Chris Daukaus, and then loses to Jailton Almeida in the main event. The UFC has been high on Rozenstruik for some reason. Rozenstruik has been a guy that they have looked to a lot to go in main event cards since the pandemic. But I feel like now they're kind of using him for Gaziev to, kind of step on him and, go forward in the weight class. However, again, I wouldn't be, I got to think about it. The last time we saw this, the UFC was kind of using Jack Hermansson to push Joe Pyfer, and Hermansson ended up winning a 25-minute decision. However, Jairzinho Rozenstruik and Shamil Gaziev is not going 25 minutes. It's not going to be a fight where Rozenstruik is going to wear him out and it's like, oh, Rozenstruik's been there before, Gaziev hasn't. No, if Rozenstruik wins, he's going to knock him out. If Rozenstruik wins, he's going to find a big shot and he's going to put down Gaziev. We will see what Gaziev brings, though. Again, Gaziev, I think, to the most part, is really unproven. He's very unknown, I think. I know he's 12-0, but really he has not beat anyone all that great. He's a win over Darko Stosic back in 2023. Stosic, a former UFC guy who won 1-3. He's now fighting in KSW. Just beat Mateusz Scheffel last night by first-round knockout. Stosic might be on his way back to the UFC, too. I don't know. But Gaziev, that's his best win. Martin Buday, right? Like, I know Buday was 13-1, but he arguably lost his fight against Lucas Brzeski, and then he beat Josh Parisia and Jake Collier, who are part of the low-level heavyweight rotation. Buday, I know, is 4-1, but Buday is kind of a fraudulent 4-1, so how good is Shamil Gaziev? Another thing out of Gaziev that I'd be a little bit concerned about from the Rozenstruik camp is his wrestling. I think Gaziev will look to go down there. If he is feeling the power of some of the Rozenstruik, and, he senses a little bit of danger out of that, considering how easily did Jailton Almeida take down Rozenstruik and submit him? It did not take very long. It took Almeida 2 takedown attempts and eventually got Rozenstruik down, took his back and subbed him pretty quickly. Curtis Blades was able to go to the well a billion times against Rozenstruik and win a 3-round decision against him at Madison Square Garden. It was in Vegas, right? Cito Gane even took down Rozenstruik a couple times. Rozenstruik is there to be taken down. Alistair Overeem saw a lot of success holding Rozenstruik down in a 5-round main event. Gaziev might go down there too. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if he went in there and submitted Jairzinho Rozenstruik, and that's actually what I'm going to pick. I'm going to take Shamil Gaziev to win the fight by first-round submission. I just don't think Rozenstruik's very good on the ground. Rozenstruik is a good kickboxer, don't get me wrong. He's got very good skills on the feet. I just don't know if he's going to have enough time to hit Gaziev, because Gaziev is going to mix this fight up. I think Gaziev's not going to play around. Gaziev's going to go down to the ground, and Gaziev is going to try to submit Jairzinho Rozenstruik. It's a first main event spot for Gaziev. Don't get me wrong. He could 100% get knocked out. I would not be surprised if Rozenstruik just pulled something out of his hat and knocked out Shamil Gaziev. But I think Gaziev's going to get that takedown, and Gaziev's going to, Gaziev's going to put it on Rozenstruik on the ground. It's either going to be a takedown, he's going to drop Rozenstruik. Gaziev's got power, don't get me wrong. I think he's going to win a lot of the exchanges with Rozenstruik on the feet. Rozenstruik is getting up there in age. He's 36 years old. He's lost a lot of fights, and his only win is Chris Daukaus. I think he will blitz Shamil Gaziev, and it's going to be up to Gaziev to see if he can get out of that spot where Rozenstruik's going to try to back him up in the corner, and Rozenstruik's going to try to overwhelm him with shots like he did against Daukaus, right? And again, Jairzinho Rozenstruik has gotten first-round knockouts early and often. The Daukaus knockout is 23 seconds. The Alan Crowder knockout is 9 seconds. Arlovsky was 29. His win to get in the UFC was 10 seconds in the regionals, right? Even his win against Augusto Sakai was a first-round knockout, even though it was the last second in the first round. Rozenstruik is known for getting first-round knockouts. I think Gaziev's going to flip the switch. I think Gaziev's going to find that takedown or find the knockdown, and he's going to just put it on Rozenstruik on the ground. I think Rozenstruik is going to have a lot of trouble with Gaziev on the ground if Gaziev's able to find, some opening and some opportunity to get a submission. I think Shamil Gaziev is going to win this fight and win the main event by first-round submission. And folks, that will do it for UFC Fight Night Rozenstruik versus Gaziev. A shorter video this week, but again, as expected, with really only 9 fights on the card. We'll see how many end up on the card by the end of the week. I think max you're probably going to get 12, but we'll see. In the main event, though, we're going with Shamil Gaziev to pick up the win by first-round submission. And folks, thank you for watching. Make sure to hit that subscribe button down and below for more. We'll be back next week for UFC 299, Sean O'Malley, Marlon Chito Vera rematch, and for a PFL. I believe they're in France again. It's PFL Europe. I think they're back in France. With Cedric Doumbé in the main event. Yes, it is back in Paris. He's got a very tough fight. We'll talk about that fight when we get to it in a couple weeks. And, of course, the Lazy King in the co-main event as well. So be on the lookout for that PFL next week. And, of course, UFC 299 from Miami, Florida as well. Again, folks, thank you for watching. Make sure that subscribe button down below for more. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy the video. Make sure to comment if you do disagree with any of the picks. Good folks, thank you for watching. And Mamba forever.